Hello everyone and welcome to my first lesson on Houdini 18.5, and this will also be doable for Houdini 19 about render farm. When we work in the field of visual effect, it very often happens that the tasks that we have to do take a lot of time. So it does not take a single computer to calculate the image that we have to do. It can be simulation. It could be rendering. We need to render all this on several machines, and each one will be responsible for a task, an image, and this is called a render farm. To manage the render farm, there are different softwares that take care of this. One of the most famous is Deadline. This is also while render, but what is interesting about Deadline is that it gives you the possibility to make your own render farm with 2-3 nodes. In other words, you have the possibility of managing 2 computers in your own render farm, and without spend money. But here it remains limited to 2 machines. If ever you want to go a little further, you will have to buy Deadline licenses. However, there is another solution, and this solution is in Houdini framework. The HQ. It's actually an internal side effects render farm that lets you manage a massive number of machines without paying anything, because it's already included in your Houdini license. Let's talk about licensing. Let's say you're a freelance artist and you decide to take an indie version of Houdini. Why indie? Because it is the most accessible version for freelance. You will pay a license $269 for years and $400 for 2 years, and this is an almost complete Houdini. With almost all modeling function, what is in relation to creation of characters, ringing, skinning, UV unwrapping, and FX too. So you will be able to do a particle system, dynamic effects such RBD, pyro, building terrain, renderings with camera, or even Wonderman. For Wonderman, we may have the opportunity to talk about it later. And at last, the Houdini engine. Very important that you keep in mind the Houdini engine. When you buy an indie version, you will therefore have an access to Karma license, an Houdini license also includes a Houdini engine license. We will see the difference between these two later, and the mantra license for rendering. If you want to remember what are the availability, you have just seen go into the compare, and you will realize that for mantra, there is unfortunately only one mantra by Houdini Indie. If you want 2 mantra, you will have to buy 2 Houdini Indie. But for Houdini Engine, you have access to licenses with a formula from Houdini, which consists to taking 3 free licenses of Houdini when you buy a Houdini Indie license. To show you in my case, if I open the services to see what I have as license, we will realize that I have 2 Indie Houdini, 2 Indie Houdini Engine, and a little supplement. An additional Indie Houdini Engine which makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 licenses for Houdini. And for the mantra, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which means that we are going to be able to create a render farm with 4 or 5 machines. But to create your render farm, you will need computer. When? You can recover whole pieces. That's not a problem, but you also need an operating system. Here I will show you how to install renderfarm with Windows and Linux machines. Maybe optional with a Mac, but for now we will be interested in Windows and Linux. The different Linux distributions that exist and which can help you. One of the first that can come to your mind, which is completely free, is Ubuntu. It takes a lot of machine and type of processors. It is very easy to install, and if you are a little more curious, you can also see Linux Mint. It has a very good follow-up. On one of the last, which is starting to have a little success, Zorin 16. Will you be interested in Zorin? I will use a free Linux distro to add a renderer. So I will have Windows as a master computer, and as master to command the other or a computer, and slave under Linux. To understand how Houdini will work, we will have a project, a task to be executed, which will be launched by the master computer. And this master computer will submit a task. And this task will be distributed by Hqueue to all slave and client computer that have an Hqueue client. For all of this to work, each machine needs, whether Linux, Mac or Windows, we need its own installation of Houdini in the origin. The difference between the two is that in context of Indie, you have a graphic user interface, while the engine is just command lines. Remember, when we look at the available license, I had access to 2 Houdini and I have an access to Houdini engine and access to 1, 2, 3 licenses. And as a last resort, you also need Mantra. It will be installed at the same time as Houdini. And I have 5 licenses for Mantra. All this is installed at the same time you install Houdini on your computer. Everything is included in it. In addition to the fact that each machine needs to have its own Houdini, all your machines, whether are Linux, Windows or Mac, must also have an access to the share folder on the network. To read original project and write in this folder. For our project, we will have to install on Windows Houdini, the Hqueue server. That's important. This is which will organize the project and dispatch them to the different slave computers. We will need to share a folder on the network and install an Hqueue client to give the possibility to Windows to render image or task. So client will run the Houdini on the computer and launch the rendering or simulation. Once we have configured the Windows, we will also configure a Linux machine. We will have to configure Houdini software, the Hqueue client. No need for the Hqueue server because it's supposed to be only one. It manages the whole farm. And the folders that will be shared on the network. And we will also make sure that everything is autonomous. I want when I start my Linux machine no interaction. All the program will start automatically.